So let's continue. Now your task was to create some other fragment. So at this moment you should have all location. You should have your application with one all locations component with query render in it, like in this screen. And inside all locations, I have basically the fragment we had there, but I left there only my ID because I'm gonna iterate my new component location with the key, which I need the ID here, right? You should use it. You should use the key here because here we are iterating. So here is it important. And I also have some fragment here. Maybe in your case the fragment is named a little bit differently. That's fine. And inside my location component, I have the actual implementation of the list. So maybe you put there some more properties, some flag, as I said. And I have the fragment here as well. Now, the reason why I forced you to do it is to understand why is it so important. And I will explain it a little bit more again. So in this case, I have the component which specifies the data requirements that are being necessary for the location component itself. So I'm specifying here that I need a name in order to render this location, and I do not specify it anywhere else. So if in the future I visit this component again and I need to do some tweaks, I can easily add some more properties, like some Slack URL or something. I don't know what is there now, but you can adjust the fragment and render it properly, and it doesn't affect anything else in your code base. So you can be safe to do whatever you want here. We saw also some errors where some of you tried to do like ID here and use it here in this component, like this. You should not do it. You can do it, but it's not allowed by default. And the reason is exactly this. It's not explicit. It's like, why would I require ID here if I don't need it here? I need it here. So if I need it in component all locations, I require it in all locations, and I do not require it in location. I think it's pretty simple, isn't it? So any questions regarding this fragmentation? Maybe, yes? Once again, louder please.
There is some utility there will throw error or something if you overfetch, so if you have a field there which are not used.
Now, okay, so question was, I said that there is a slint that will help us to prevent overfetching in GraphQL, and you don't have it. Well, I guess it's your IDE, right? So ignore the red flags here, which I see in my IDE, and you will see it when you run yarn lint. And yarn lint will tell me in a minute that, come on, that I'm querying ID, but I don't use it, so don't do it. Now, I just forgot, I didn't tell you some other features. Maybe you will be interested that in this Bono repo you can run lint with watch, for example, because we don't use the default slint runner for a reason. So you can just run it with the lint and just keep it running and be happy. So you can see there is an error, and I'm using ID, but I'm requiring ID, but I don't need it. So just stop doing it, and it's fine.
I have one question. Just if you define props for relay data prop, it always should be nullable type?
No. Yeah, okay. So the question was, if I define data property, if it should be always nullable. And no. Actually, when I was doing it here and you were not watching, I did it non-nullable, but then I decided to change it because you can specify it non-nullable, but in this case you have to handle the situation where my one node is null, and you have to do something like if node is null here, then just, I don't know, return some error or just skip it, whatever. I decided to pass it down, and in this case, because in all locations I see that edge can be null, and these types are generated from GraphQL server, so this reflects what we specified in GraphQL server. So if I know that the node can be null, then I just specified the input type of location as a nullable, and of course I have to handle it here. I think in reality it's pretty convenient to do it in the end component, because you don't have to force everyone to handle this situation in every component where you use it. Just accept kind of anything and deal with the false situation in the component. But again, depends on your use case. Maybe you just don't want to accept it, so it's your type. Now,
Just one question.
uh-huh.
Would it be possible to query the location at the root level and then reuse that in the node, like in the list? So like we have like node as it's called underneath edges. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it possible?
Well, you would like to fetch it here in app.js?
Yeah, like I'm just curious. Like if you had a
Yeah.
page showing your location by itself, is that a different thing to having a location as a node?
I'm not sure I understand the use case. The first, well, I would answer like if you could fetch locations here. I would answer again, if you need it, yeah. So if you want to do basically what we had there and just extract the location somewhere else and keep here the edges node, the all location query, then go for it. But the same rules apply. You have to fetch only what you need in the query. So if you need locations directly here, go for it. In this case, I need like what I ask here for the all locations query. Here it's a little bit weird, so I'm just rendering the all locations component. I'm expecting the type on a root query, and this is why I'm not fetching anything else here. In this case, again, I need to use location, and this is the reusability part. I need to someone implemented in my components location component. I need to use it here because it's good, it's nice, it's the right use case. So I'm using it in my React code, and I know that this component inside requires the data from the fragment. So when I use it, I just spread it somewhere and use the data from it. So I'm always using only what I need in this particular case. So before we go to something a little bit more difficult, I would like to mention how does it work with errors in GraphQL, because if you are coming from a REST world into GraphQL, there are some things that can surprise you. Like for instance, if GraphQL returned an error in its response, it can still be HTTP code 200, because GraphQL by design supports like partial responses. So you get like, in this case, for instance, we get location name, but we didn't get location, let's say, picture URL, because our service that is providing pictures is failing. So you get only null and you get error, but it's still 200 because it's kind of successful. There is nothing like, well, successful but not really code. And other thing that may surprise you are errors, and we are struggling a lot how to do it properly. So in a response, when server responds, you get data, right? But if something fails, you also get the property errors here. Now, you should consider these errors to be like system errors. There are two kinds of errors: system errors and application errors. And these errors are system errors that happen when your backend service is down and you need to somehow recover from it. And usually these errors are very uncomfortable, and you should avoid them as much as possible. And you should definitely not use them in your UI. You will never get them in your UI, at least in our wrapper of Relay. There are also application errors. And now we are playing with one pattern So I will show you how does it look like, but it's not really used everywhere yet. Still experimenting. There are some difficulties with it. So, but you can play with it even now. It's hidden in danger zone, which is itself pretty hidden. So you just copy paste the query here. Ooh. And oh yeah, sorry, it doesn't work. It's not that easy. Now the structure is a bit different. I will explain in a minute. So this is our new query. Works the same. The structure is a little bit different. You can ignore the danger zone because this is just a nesting to hide it. But I'm not accessing directly the edges and the nodes. I am accessing the location connection first. And on this, this is so-called inline fragment because this query is a bit different. It returns not the location connection directly, but it returns multiple types, and you can decide what to do in what situations. So, for instance, when I get some HTTP error, for instance, you can react accordingly in your UI. So those are application errors. So in case you get successful response, you get really the data you requested. In case you get unsuccessful response, which you can force fail here just to simulate that. For example, we were fetching something from our backend surveys and we got 500 for some reason or some error. Then I should maybe force it, right? Then you get something else, and you get different response. You see, I get all locations, but I got the message and status code. And again, in your code, you just make the decision in your UI what to do in this situation. So Flow will generate the right types for you, and you can just say, hey, if I got, usually what you do actually is like you fetch the type name here. So if I got this HTTP error type, then render a nice UI error. But in case I got the response, which is like what you should get, like the location connections, then just render the locations as you would. And actually, if you're really interested in the real implementation with all flow types, everything, there's other repository in the root. It's like next to workshop JS Saturday is Relay example. And in the Relay example, there is a little bit more, but basically, I think in the locations paginated bidirectional is implementation of this pattern. So you can see how does it work in real life. Okay. So this is just, I think it's interesting way how to deal with UI errors and system errors. On the other hand, I have to warn you that if you are using this pattern now, then it will pretty sure bite you once in the future. And that's because it's relatively new pattern, and Relay does not support everything perfectly. So in this case, it is not really easy to paginate these results, but that's like limitation that is being worked on. So in the future, it's gonna be fine. Still, GraphQL is very young technology, so some patterns are still being discovered. So those are the errors, and I wanted to show you something else. We can skip this, but oh yeah, and in the Relay example, itself is more special than you would expect. There are some other stuff, like for example Relay artifacts. I will show you. So when you look inside the file I showed you before, for instance, where we deal with the location connection and the danger zone with HTTP errors, you can see that all types are generated. The generated types are imported absolutely, like absolute path, and all the generated fragments are stored in one folder, which allows us to work with flow types on next level, because now Relay compiler know where the files are in the file system and improves the internal flow types even more. So it's just one small flag in here. You just use artifacts directory, similar to how you use persistent queries, you can use all together and just get really good flow types and a really good way how to work with the fragments. So, but now let's do the pagination finally, and let's move to all locations file. This is where we iterate all the files and where is the create fragment container. And instead of importing create fragment container, we are going to import create refetch container. And I will just replace the name. And you can go to your browser, try it, and it's gonna work. It's a drop-in replacement for fragment container, refetch container. It just works. There are multiple containers in Relay itself, but in reality, you can solve basically every problem with fragment container, which is the most common, or with refetch container. And I will actually show you like the pagination, 2 types of pagination using the refetch container. It's very simple. So what are we going to do now? I'll jump into the GraphQL back and let's see how we can paginate the results. So I will fetch first 5 results, and I have to do it a little bit smaller now, but you will see it in your code, in your browser. So let's take ID of London, for example, and I will just show you how does it work with pagination in GraphQL. It's pretty smart. I'm fetching first 5 locations, and I'll just copy the ID of the London, okay, and I will do new query that will actually paginate the page. So the second query, you can that's the funny part about GraphQL is that you can actually fetch, you can actually send multiple queries at the same time. You should do it. Like for instance, on the front end, Umbrella is sending like 10 requests like REST API. It's not necessary. You can send one request with all the queries. You don't even send the queries, right? You send just the persistent, like the hash. But what I'm gonna do is I'll write the same query. Let's oh, you can actually see even the fragment. That's great. So I wrote 2 queries. One query is fetching only one request, one location, and the second query, which you can see here, is fetching the five locations. And I'm using the fragment there, so I don't have to repeat myself. That's a great example of how it's actually designed very well for UI. You can just reuse components. Now, I would like, let's say I'm on the page London, and I would like to get page after London. So what I do, I will request get me first location after the ID of the London. So you query this ID, and I said I want first location after this ID, and if everything goes well, I should get Los Angeles. I got Manila. Okay, it's not a good example, is it? Why did I get Manila? Once again. Yeah, most probably. Sorry, I don't know our GraphQL. Yeah, that's better. So let's use cursor instead. Forget everything I said. Let's use cursor, which identifies the how to say it when I messed up now. Well, the cursor shows where the record is in my list, basically. So now I actually got Los Angeles. So ID is like globally unique everywhere in the system, but it doesn't necessarily tell me where the record is. But cursor, on the other hand, has the information about where the record is in my database or in my GraphQL. So I can say, give me first location after London, based on the cursor, and you get Los Angeles with the ID. Maybe I should just get rid of this ID. It's a bit confusing. So this way I got Los Angeles after London, and the same way I could get one before, right? And I would expect that there is going to be New York. So let's try it, just before, first before, and I got Manila again. Did I do something wrong? It worked when I trained. Okay. Well, oh, sorry, I'm an idiot. You have to use the right combination, of course, and maybe we should. Yeah, no, yeah, it behaves correctly, but it's unexpected if you don't think about it correctly. You have to get the last before London, because I ask for the first one in the list before London, which is Manila, but now I want the last one before London. So I usually use combination get me first after or get me last before. But of course it's very valid to ask for first before. Why not? So this is how you paginate. You just use the different combination of the inputs. Now, the little bit problematic here is that I have to change the arguments, and the query is changing. So you can use easily like first null, after null, which is the query we are actually going to use. So this way I can really just last before, or make these two arguments null and use first after. In this case, our query is stable, doesn't change, except it's written there. Now I can make it completely stable, which is exactly what we are gonna need, and I can use so-called variables. So the query can have variables like this, like the last. Does it work like this? No, I made it.
Dollar sign first,
yeah.
and then the type.
This is gonna be used differently later. And so I'm just specifying that the query requires some variables, but not using them yet. And the other one is gonna be before, right? And in the variables, which is plain Java JSON, you just say one last one before this. So I specified like this, and I use the variables from the query. Last and before. So here you go. And now I have query, which is always the same. It's a stable query. We don't have to change anything in there, but I can ask for change the variables, and I can get different results. And the way how it works in reality is that you send this query or the MD5 hash to the server, and the only thing you send with the payload is the JSON with your variables. This way you can tweak the inputs. So no GraphQL injection, no query string merging together. No. So why not to copy paste it actually? I can just use the all locations and let me think. Yeah, why not? So I will just copy paste it, but what I'm gonna do here is I will just tweak the arguments a little bit, and just last before I will delete it. Honestly, we don't need it now. We will do it, but not now. And what did I do here? Something is very unhappy.
You forgot to break it.
Thank you. So what did I have here before? I just put there the after null, right? was very difficult way how to put, like, how to write two words. Okay, well, anyway, we are getting there. So it should still work. Relay compiler, again, don't forget. But now we are in troubles because our query specifies like the variables that it expects, but we are in troubles because there is no query, so I cannot write this. Where should I write this? It's a bit complicated situation now. So there's a way how to do it in Relay. It's like you still want to keep the encapsulation of the fragments inside the component. So the way how you specify variables that are being required by the fragment is using argument definitions. Argument definitions, and yeah, the format is a bit different. I need to specify, let's say, first and its type, and okay. So I'm specifying the, yeah, you have to write it, so I'm gonna be slow here. The syntax is not super nice. But when I specify the variable like this, I can use it. Oh, no, you didn't see this. Never like this. Just my fat fingers. And let's check the compiler. Why not? It will help us. Okay, it works. Which is a bit strange, to be honest. Did not expect it's gonna work. Okay, let's say it works. Look, just a programmer. I want to see what's gonna happen. Okay, yeah.
It's undefined.
Yeah. So I just made I just rendered the dump of our database, basically. Not cool. So there are two ways how to deal with this. I can specify default value, which is not gonna work. Here we go. But this is not nice. I mean, I wrote it here, and you cannot really do this, because if you do this, compiler will say no, just don't do it. So you never do this string concatenation, and it's not really nice to write it there, right? Because maybe I want dynamic queries. So one way how I could do it is to say int is going to be required, which is the exclamation mark, right? In this case, oh yeah, now here we go. Relay compiler is complaining because I'm using this fragment somewhere else, but I specified that I need the first argument and I need to pass it down. So the way how I do it, how I like send variables inside my fragment, is to inside app.js write arguments, and here I can do first 20, which should work. It works. UI is still okay. But it's like I didn't really solve the problem, right? Because I just move it to some other file. Not cool. So, but now we have a much better situation because in this file there is the query. So what I can do is I can define the query here, let's say. So first is gonna be int. I can use the first like a variable, and I can send down the variables. And if I did everything right, then it's gonna work. And I have dynamic number of lists. I can do whatever I want with this, right? So I will just repeat it. If I have a fragment somewhere in the file, I can specify, I can write here what variables are required by something in the fragment using argument definitions, where you just describe you need variable first with some type. And when you use the type somewhere else, then you should also specify this directive argument, where you can send the actual variable inside the fragment. So those are two directives that work together. I will continue because if you are lost, just raise your hand. Micah is there waiting for you. And what are we going to do now is we are going to render a button that when we click on the button, we will move to the next page. It's like half of the pagination, right? So it's just a React code, maybe some div here, some button. Let's go next. And there is going to be some onClick, go next function. It's really like nothing GraphQL Relay specific here. And we will go next, and going next means to call some callback here. And I will show you the... Oh, it's maybe too late, sorry. I didn't show you something, but basically, if I would do console warning now, when we were using the create fragment container, you would see that inside the props, you will have only the locations. But if I do console warning now of the props, you will see that thanks to the create refetch container, we got even relay property here. And relay property contains... Oh, sorry, this relay property would be actually even in the previous case, but only with environment. In this case, I have special callback, refetch callback, which has some input arguments. I can just kind of ignore it now, but I will make a note here. And when we click on the button to go next, I will just call the props relay, and there is function refetch, which you already saw, with the refetch variables, render variables, blah, 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 blah. And we are going to be interested only in the first argument, which is refetch variables. And basically, we will say go refetch 20 new locations. We'll do something here. But that's not all. It's like when I press the button now, it's gonna crash. The reason for this is that we need to specify also the query that is gonna be called after we try to refetch the query. So I specified I use the last argument of create refetch container. And by the way, this is my most common mistake. You probably cannot see very well, but my most common mistake is that I write it here inside the object, which is wrong. You have to use it like the third argument of the function. And inside this query, we are going to write our, I don't know, all locations refetch query.
First letter. First letter.
This is how I do it normally. Spend half of the time fixing. And this is query that is gonna be called when we try to refetch something. And because I'm a bit lazy, I will just use the same fragment. Why not? Here we go. Now it's not gonna work. There are still some things we have to do, but let's try it. I like to try things when they are broken. Oh, this is pretty broken. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so my compiler is not happy. I see. So, see, my compiler is not happy, which is good because it helps me. There's a nice error that shows me that I'm using all locations underscore locations fragment, but I specified in this fragment that first is required and I'm not using it here. So what I should do the same like I did in app.js. I have to use the fragments, the arguments here, specified here, maybe specified even here. Don't worry, we are going to tweak the code. Now it's like repeating, not very nice. Don't worry about it. But now this should actually work, maybe. Yeah, when I click it, and you can see in the console something is going on there. And it's actually sending the first 20. So the argument first 20 is being sent to the refetch query. However, it does nothing because I just said refetch the same request with the same first argument, so not very useful. But this is one of the features of kiwi.com Relay that you get by default. By the way, other feature is that, as you can see, I'm clicking like pretty fast and the responses are pretty fast. That's the burst cache in practice. It's not sending a request to the server. It's just getting the same data because it's obvious. Now, let's make it work actually. I showed you in the GraphQL kiwi.com that the way how you move in the list is using the cursors, and which is one way how to do it. Other way how to get this information about the page is to use field that is named page info, and in page info I have information about the list that I got back or I will get back, and you can get an information here about whether there is a next page, whether there is a previous page, and I'm interested in the end cursor. I'm interested in the last cursor in the list because that's the one we are going to fetch after, right? It's like we have 20 locations now, and if I go to paginate to the next page, I need 20 locations after the last cursor. So this is exactly what we are going to use. I'm going to write here the page info with the end cursor inside my query, inside my all locations. Again, Relay compiler is happy, so I'm happy as well. And now I'm going to adjust the refetching here a little bit. I need to send, like as we said before, first 20, and it must be after the property we fetched, and it's hidden in props, locations, all locations, right? There is the thank you. Jesus, so many typos. And there's the end cursor. So now I'm saying when I click the button, this prop.relay.refetch is gonna be called with first 20 after my end cursor, which will call this query. Still, obviously it's not gonna work because I need to specify, of course, the after here. So I will say I expect that you're going to give me after variable, and this after variable is going to be used in the query, of course, like this. That's pretty simple, and it's nullable, so I don't have to send it, but I want to send it, of course. So I will say here, maybe like this. Relay compiler is still happy. Perfecto. And now after, it's always like the combination of two. When you are dealing with fragments, you have always fragments somewhere where you use the fragment and somewhere where you define the fragment. So I'm just defining the requirements of the fragment, and I am fulfilling the requirements. It's pretty simple. And now if I refresh the page, I should in theory paginate to the next page, which is exactly what happened. Did you see? Now, I mean, the numbers of the list are not good because I did it wrong, but Otherwise, it works. So we are paginating. You can see there is always first after the last cursor, and it just works. So now, before I end this part, I would like to know if you got super lost and you need some help or some explanation first. And if not, your task for next after lunch maybe is going to first finish the pagination, do the flow types properly, maybe fix the one here, the number here is not correct, which is, by the way, very simple. You just use some state and just start it from somewhere, and this number should be like the correct one. See? So just increase the number depending on whether you are going next or no. And now you can really play with the stuff. And what I want from you is to do the back pagination, do the other direction. So now we are going next. Look, it's very simple. Again, you will have to specify here 2 more arguments. So here is going to be last before, which is the other direction. And here, you are just going to send it. Okay? And there's going to be one more button, which is going to be go to the previous page. There's going to be one more function, which is going to be go pref. And the difference in the functions is going to be that in go next page, you are going to call first 20 after something, and then you should reset the value. So it's going to be like before null, before null, last null. And in the go pref page is going to be quite the opposite, right? So first null, after null, before some cursor, which is going to be start cursor, and last 20. If you are really lost, try to play with it, because I think this is quite important to understand the refetch container. But if you are really lost, you can go to relay example, and in pages there is location, I think it's the bidirectional, and here is the implementation already done. So you can actually take it from here. You see, use the arguments, and it should nicely work. See?
Is it important to nullify non-used arguments? In that refetch function, when you call it, you said that if, for example, first and after non-used, then you should put null then.
I am not sure. I think it depends on how you. If if you have to use the null props here, try it. I think it kind of depends on how you write the argument definitions, and I'm not sure if it's gonna work. Maybe not. I don't know. Try it. Just play with it. I mean, honestly, this is pattern that you will write like once and then you wrap it and you will never write it again in your application. And try it. Maybe it would be interesting to just let me think a little bit. Yeah, just play with it. I think I'm done here.
Can you show me up.js file?
Once again,
Up.js file.
is up.js file. Yeah. I think again, relay example. How did I do here? Oh yeah, no. Yeah, this is okay. So this is one way how to do it. I mean, there are many ways, but I think this is pretty okay. Just, again, if I repeat it, sending the first 20 from my top component, so I can change how many locations you get based on your state or whatever. and inside the all locations, we didn't touch the location.js at all. Just paginating inside all locations, I changed the create fragment container to create refetch container. Now I specified what arguments are necessary for this new fragment, because this fragment expects some variables, because we are changing the variables. You write another refetch query, which will be called when you actually click the button. And I just implemented the button, which is really like from props relay refetch. Oh, but by the way, when you are going to fix the flow errors, you will see that this prop relay, in this case it's only prop relay is missing. So you have to write it like this, and you get the type from refetch relay prop from kiwi.com/relay. And this will help you to avoid some mistakes when refetching. That's it. That's it for now.
Is that type specific to your package or?
Yes.